good afternoon. Actually, good morning. We normally do the show at noon. It's good morning, and welcome to a special edition of Dialogue with Deidre and Black Thought. I'm Deidre Malone.
And I'm Dr. Noel Hutchinson.
So glad to have you with us this morning. We have a special guest in the studio, Attorney Benjamin Crump, the president of the National Bar Association, partner of the law firm Parks and Crump in Florida, and author, president of his own nonprofit. You have a lot going on, but most importantly, today, you're the guest speaker for the Memphis branch of the NAACP. Welcome to Memphis.
Thank you so much for having me, Deidre, Reverend Hutchinson.
Look, we wanted to start off by asking most of us became familiar with you with the Trayvon Martin case. I think across this nation, people were like glued to that case. But we want to just roll it back a little bit and talk about what interested you in practicing law.
It's and the White House calling me on my cell phone.
The White House.
Thurgood Marshall was my personal hero. Even when I was in the 4th grade in North Carolina and we first integrated the schools, I was fascinated when we saw the little white children with so much, and all of us who got bused in from the south side of the tracks had so little. In fact, I put it on my law school application that there was a little white girl, Jennifer Kinlaw, who had $100 bill, Deidre. Mm-hmm. And, my mother worked 2 jobs in a factory and a hotel, and she would have to work almost 2 weeks to get $100 and so forth back in those times, the early 70s. And I remember the little white girl when we were at lunch in the cafeteria. She had the $100 bill. All the black kids, you could get free or reduced lunch and so forth. We would have the free lunch card where they punched a hole and we have to get whatever they were serving, or you could have a la carte where you could go buy hot dogs, hamburgers, pizza, ice cream, what everything what little children wanted. And so all the white kids would have money to go buy a la carte lunches. And so we were there with Jennifer, and we were all talking, the little black children, little white children, and we said, whose money is that? And she said, that's mine, that's my allowance. And we was like, didn't believe her. And to just exacerbate clearly that it was her money, she said, I can do what I want with it, and I'll buy you all lunch too. And I remember from that day to this one thinking, why does certain people from certain communities have it so good while others had it so bad? And I knew the reason why they said we had integrated the schools was because of Brown versus Board of Education and Thurgood Marshall. Right. And so I said at that point, I want to be like Thurgood Marshall because I want to make it good for my side of town, for my neck of the woods too. And that's what first got me into law. That incident, I remember it vividly like it was yesterday.
It sounds like that was also part of the impetus that drove you after law school, because I noticed that your motto for your law firm is, we help David fight Goliath. So kind of talk to us about, I guess, your philosophy of doing law and your law firm. Let's kind of open that up.
Certainly. Reverend Hutchinson, my law partner, Darryl Parks, and I, we turned down our job offers and so forth. And we started our law firm because we wanted to do stuff that we believed in. We wanted to go try to help our community. And we didn't think other law firms would let us go do that. And so, they say ignorance is bliss, Deidre.
Right.
We, fresh out of law school, we set up our shingle. We never looked back, and thank God it has been a blessing. And we've been able to do those things to help the least of ye. And I think it's that passion from growing up with a single mother in the projects that you wanted to go fight for the people who you felt were responsible for you being who you are.
Right.
And so that's what we continue to do, whether it's in Ferguson or whether it's in Oklahoma City, where We represent the 13 black women who got raped by the young white police officer, whether it's in Los Angeles where Alicia Thomas was killed by LAPD and is captured on video, the female version of Eric Gardner, I Can't Breathe. Well, I mean, it's all these cases, they remind you of people who you grew up in your neighborhood. And so shame on me if I don't go try to stand for them and fight for them, when the reason I'm where I'm at today was because those people prayed for us, looked out for us, you know, and they wanted you to go further than they knew they ever would go, because you were the young people, you were the future. And so I think all my mama friends who worked in the factory and all those folks who are just marvel with pride, I can't turn my back on them.
No, you can't. And with the leadership role that you have, I mean, you wear a number of hats, Attorney Crump, but a new one for you since last year is being the president of the National Bar Association, representing 60,000 attorneys. What has that been like for you so far?
Well, Deidre, that's the reason I'm sure why I got the call coming from the White House. Being president of the National Bar Association, representing 66,000 black lawyers, judges, and legal professionals in America and beyond, the largest association of lawyers of color in the world, representing the interests, concerns, and opportunities of not only the lawyers, but also their clients and communities they serve. And so with that hat, we do get opportunities to try to use that platform on issues that are bigger than just our individual cases. It's talking about things like the vacancy on the Supreme Court. It's talking about the vacancies that the president has to fill on the federal court. And we know these are lifetime positions, and we can't underscore enough how important this Supreme Court vacancy is, because that is going to decide the balance of the court, which for at least the next decade is going to impact our lives more than anybody else. Probably. And so the National Bar, we do those important governmental matters. We also have strong contingency for voters' rights. You know, this election is a very important election.
It sure is.
And, you know, we can't let them steal it. We can't let them do undemocratic things to keep our people, minorities, black and brown people, from voting, because the one thing that's very important, Reverend Hutchinson, we all talk about 2008 election as being the watershed moment, the historic moment, and it was important. The first time we had an election of an African-American president. But I submit to you that 2012 was probably the most significant election, because it was the first time in America that the least amount of white people voted for the person who eventually became the president of the United States. So what did that tell us? That if people of color come out and vote,
that's right,
we can always influence the outcome of the election. We are the critical mass who will decide who's going to be president, regardless of what others do. We just got to come and vote.
Well, we just have to figure out, too, what's going to, everybody wanted to vote for President Obama, but people don't understand now how it affects every part of your life, who you vote for. And we've got to figure out now with this election, because it's so critical,
yes, ma'am,
how we're going to get people out to vote.
Yeah, and you said something so important there, Deidre. It's important who the president is, and it's important to vote for the national offices, but it's far more important to vote for your local offices, because who that prosecutor is going to control.
Exactly.
If they're going to send your cousin, your neighbor, Junebug, Leroy, whether they're going to get treated like Little Billy or not.
You must have been to Shelby County, Tennessee before.
Exactly, Doc. Exactly.
And so those are important. The judges' races are so important.
Exactly.
The supervisor election.
That's right.
To make sure they don't close the polls early and
like they want to do.
Again, you must have been here before, because we have those particular issues right here. But let me just ask you this real quick, because I know we don't have a lot of time. For the average person, and just give us your opinion, are things getting worse for us as black people? Are things better, or is it just a matter of things are becoming more obvious from where you sit?
Well, I think it's always perspective and it's always time. And it's funny, I was reading Warren Williams' book on Thurgood Marshall, and it was real profound how you look at things that happened 50 years ago and they are still relevant today. When we talk about educating our children in charter schools and public schools and vouchers and so forth. So it really is about perspective. I guess naive thing to say, to try to simplify it, Reverend Hutchinson, is I'd rather light a match versus curse the darkness. And whoever wins this election is going to speak volumes to is it getting better or worse, because if the Republican nominee wins the election, then it is likely he's going to get to appoint a Supreme Court justice who's going to strike down a lot of the gains that we made. However, if a Democratic nominee is elected president, then we very well likely, and I'm going so fast in my mind, I got so much I want to say on this.
That's all right.
If the Democratic nominee is elected, we're very much likely to see the appointment of the first African-American female to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And I think that perspective has never been on the highest court in America. I mean, think about the perspective of a black woman as it relates to school vouchers.
That's powerful.
As it relates to equal pay, as it relates to these police brutality cases. You know, think about the opinions that she would write.
Exactly.
You know, and so it's perspective if it's getting better or worse. A lot of it is in our hands, and if we make sure we come out and control our destiny with the constitutional right to vote. You know, I could tell you the other side of the coin too, Reverend Hutchinson, when you see little black and brown boys continually being shot and killed, and we got video and nothing happens, you say, well, have we really advanced from Emmett Till days?
We have a case right here with Darius Stewart, and the cop that shot him has still not come up for administrative review. He was supposed to go under administrative review back in either the end of December or the beginning of January, and here we are waving at April, and nothing's been done.
You know, part of my speech today, Reverend Hutchinson, Deidre, I'm going to talk, the title of my speech is going to be Martin Luther King's Legal Advice from the Birmingham Jail. Because, you know, everybody conclude he was talking to the clergy, and he was talking to a lot of us, and I think he really was talking to us in the legal community when he said we as moral individuals have an obligation to oppose unjust laws. And so how can we look at these bad things happen where you have children being shot on video in the back? Laquan McDonald shot 7 times. Tamir Rice in Cleveland, who I represent his father, his 12-year-old kid shot on the playground, and in less than 2 seconds. Natasha in Virginia, you know, the mentally ill woman who's handcuffed and tased 12 times and died. You see all these things happen, but they intellectually justify why nobody did anything criminally, and we see this, we as moral people cannot sit by and not oppose this kind of stuff. So that's what I'm going to talk about a lot and say, okay, we understand us lawyers, we can intellectually justify anything, but what about the moral justification? What about the ethics of the matter? And think about this. You all know for years in our community that the judges and the prosecutors all said when little black boys and little Spanish boys sold $50 worth of crack or $50 worth of marijuana, they put the little Hispanic boys and the little black boys in prison for years, 25 years, life, all kind of long sentences. And what was their justification? They said, it's because you're poisoning the community. We got to put you away. That's all they always say. So now in Flint, Michigan, we actually have where they poison the community.
Exactly.
And nothing happens to these state leaders, the governor, the water management district. Nothing happens to them. So how do you justify that?
That's right.
It can't be justified unless you just speak truth to power and say you're trying to criminalize black and brown people.
Right.
And so we got to speak truth to power, and that's what we're going to be talking about, that we cannot intellectually justify these things over and over, saying, well, it's legal. We have to remember everything that Hitler did to the Jews, they said was legal. So at some point we have to apply morals and ethics to what we're doing.
Attorney Crump, what would you tell young African American and Hispanic boys today how to deal with their interaction with police? Based on the cases that you've tried and your experience, what are your thoughts?
Well, as an officer of the court, I still have to believe in my heart of hearts, or I can't do it, that the system has to work for everybody equally. And so one of the things is making sure that they get to the courthouse and that there's not judgment rendered on the street corner.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so to that there, you want to try to encourage them to be respectful and dignified as much as can be. I think about Michael Brown, and I think about it's very difficult to tell young black and brown boys to show respect when there's no respect being shown to them, because we got to remember the first words that the police officer said in Ferguson to Michael Brown and his friend as they were walking on the street that afternoon was, if you don't get out the street, or get the F out the street, or there's going to be trouble. Now, if that's the first words the police officer engaged to you, how are we to tell our young people you're supposed to respect that?
I can see how my sons would be looking at them. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But, Charles Blow from the New York Times, I thought said the most profound thing on this matter. And he said it after Trayvon's verdict. He wrote in the New York Times, after this verdict, I want to tell my boys to run. He said, as a parent, after this verdict, I want to tell my boys to run, even when they're right. But as a black man, I can't do that. Because if we don't teach our children to stand up for themselves, and we tell them to be docile and submissive and have no dignity and so forth, what does it end?
Right.
That's a slippery slope.
It is.
Yeah.
And so I think the most we can tell our boys when they have these interactions with police officers, try to be respectful, try to get home safe, let us adults deal with it. You don't try to deal with it right there on the street, because as Tupac said so eloquently, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
Yeah.
Right.
He
sure did.
So.
Well, now, let me ask you this question. What can the average person do, the average African-American, average person do in terms of this whole struggle? Because a lot of times they may see you, they may see Deidre, they may see me and say, well, they're in a position to make change. But I'm of the opinion that all of us are at the place where we can make some change. So now, how do you see this? What can the average person do?
Well, there's a lot the average person can do. One of the things I think is so important is just showing up. I mean, just showing up is huge. When you get that notice for jury duty, when you're summoned,
Yes, sir.
man, one of the things that's most heartbreaking to black lawyers is we walk in the courtroom and we representing little Shaniqua or Junebug, and the only thing other than us that's black in the courtroom is the judge's robe. And then they bring the prospective jurors in. And he say, you cross your fingers, you pray to God, please let me have somebody who can identify with Shaniqua and our community and our culture where we come from. And they come up there in jury duty and they come up with every excuse in the book to try to get out of serving on that jury.
Yeah.
And you just shake your head and you say, my God, that could be the person that saves this young black child from going to prison, get justice for this person of color. But they just get off on it where our brethren from the white community, they just waiting to serve on jury duty. They've been waiting for this for years. I get to sit in judgment. I get to decide the fact. Because remember, on jury duty, that's where your vote really counts.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it counts more percentage-wise. Just think about it. In the presidential election, we have 50 million people vote in America. You 1 out of 50 million. Your vote count, but hey, it's 1 out of 50 million.
Right.
When you're in a jury, it's either 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 12.
Yeah.
And your vote makes all the difference in the world. So to answer your question directly, that's the first thing. Going down to city hall meetings. I mean, the churches need to do this, real. I mean, when you have Darius Stewart case and they ain't doing that, and everybody need to go down to city hall and say, we gonna not let you all talk about anything else until y'all talk about our children too, because our children matter. I mean, it's just showing up. Obviously, we want you to vote.
Right.
Obviously, we want you to do all these things, but showing up to jury duty, showing up to city council meetings, showing up to NAACP meetings, I mean, showing up to anything matters because your presence is felt.
That's right.
And if you don't show up, then people are going to continue to just do things that's going to affect your life, and you have no say-so. So I think we can do all kind of things. We can send our sons and daughters to be the police officers, to be the prosecutors and so forth. Have the discretion to make the decision. A lot of people don't want to be prosecutors. I always say, no. Go be the prosecutor.
Exactly.
I don't want to put black men in jail. But as the prosecutor, you got a choice. You get to decide whether this probable cause affidavit is trumped up or whether it's legitimate.
That's right.
So you can stop it before it starts.
That's right.
Final 2 questions for you, because we know that you got to get out of here. You have some other interviews. But I wanted to talk to you about the body cam situation across the country. And here in Tennessee, we've purchased some here in Memphis, and just read that the state of Tennessee is trying to have a moratorium on body cams in terms of the releasing of the videos for at least a year after they're captured. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, is that lack of transparency?
Deidre.
What?
The whole reason for the video camera in the first place is transparency. And so it flies in the face of all common sense to say, why would you hold the videotape for a year from the public? What is it? So you can concoct the story, you can try to change the narrative. It just makes no sense. The video is there to give us an objective vantage point of what happened and the citizen losing their liberty interest or their life interest in a confrontation or interaction with law enforcement. And if we've learned anything from Ferguson, Baltimore, Staten Island, it's much more expensive to hide the truth and have to go through all the protests and the grand juries and all this here versus just show the video.
Right.
And we can see right there if the police did anything wrong or our citizen did anything wrong, and we can decide it based on the law, equal protection of the law. That's all we're asking for, nothing more, nothing less. And so the whole thing that you can't, they got these laws they're passing saying you can't record the police on your cell phone and so forth. It just goes against the fundamentals of the American Constitution that we want everything to be equal. We want the truth to come out. We want the courts to be consistent and they not be inconsistent decisions and so forth. So I don't understand that at all. Unless you're just trying to hide the ball.
Sounds like it to me.
Exactly.
Final question, Doc.
Let me just segue to this final question, and I'm going to ask a question, then you can just tag in any final thoughts.
Yes, sir.
I want to talk about your community side. And I know that everything you do is about the community, but you have an organization, mydad.org, and a lot of times people don't ask you this question, I don't think. So I want to give you an opportunity to kind of share with us what's behind that, and then any closing thoughts you want to tag to it.
Certainly, Rev, every time I go on these conservative shows on Fox News, they all come and say, well, what about black on black crime? What on black on black crime? And I say, well, we were here talking about a police-involved shooting, or quasi-police-involved shooting of a person of color. But, since you bring it up, we're going to address it, even though it's like comparing apples to oranges.
That's right. That's right.
We expect criminals to be criminals. We don't expect the police to commit criminal acts.
That's right.
And so forth. And so, but since you brought it up, let's talk about it. We understand we have responsibilities in our community for our citizens and what happened to us as well. And so My Dad 360 is a program that we started consistent with My Brother's Keeper to try to really address this irreplaceable role of the father in the household. Because fathers are very important. Now, I was raised by a single mother, and so I understand completely the value of a mother. But you need that strong male figure to be involved in these young boys' lives to tell us and show us examples of what we're supposed to do. You asked the question about interaction with the police. Well, a lot of us, we're having to try to figure out on our own because there's never been a man around. And so a lot of times this dynamic is exacerbated with stuff in the courts and the government relations matters. With, when you get welfare, the father can't be in the household, or child support. If you ain't paid the child support, they got the warrant out for them. And just a lot of young men feel embarrassed that they can't provide for them, put a roof over their head, put food on the table. So, or if they incarcerated, as many of them are, they don't want to have their children see them in this negative light. So we're trying to break down all the barriers, all the excuses why you won't have that relationship with your child, because that's the most important role you're ever going to play in life. It doesn't matter job titles or anything. Your first role to those children, and I know because my 3-year-old daughter, when her daddy walks in the room, nothing else matters. And that's such a irreplaceable role. So Reverend Hutchinson, what we're trying to do, and mydad.org, and I encourage everybody to go to the website, we're trying to help find them employable skills, trying to help them with their parenting skills, their mentoring skills, as well as dealing with some real life situations like when you have child support and you can't kill a job, what can you do to stay out of jail? What can you do to try to have the resources to have a house or a roof over their head and put food on the table? How you can be involved irrespective, even if you and the mother of the child aren't getting along. We want to talk to you about relationship skills and how you interact with that mother, even though you all are going to be separated, but you all have this child, so you need to be able to come together for this child that you're raising. And so we're trying to do everything in our power, because we believe if we can get more fathers showing these young brothers a better way, that there won't be so much black on black crime. We all have a role to play, and the only limit is our imagination, what we can do. I just can't stop in the courtroom. I got to also keep trying to do stuff in the community, because a lot of times people don't see what we do in the courtroom, but they will see what we do in the community. They'll see what we do at the NAACP luncheon today, what we do at church, what we do when we go out at the rallies. And so these young brothers gotta see that black men are not just selling drugs, we're not just committing crime, but we're taking a stand because their lives matter.
Attorney Benjamin Crump, Wow, thank you so much for being on Dialogue with Deidre and Black Thought.
Thank you
we
so
really
much,
appreciate it. And
Bless
we
you,
look
sir.
forward to
God
hearing
bless
your speech today at the NAACP luncheon.
Yes, ma'am.
You're watching Dialogue with Deidre and Black Thought. Thanks so much for joining us.
Put your mind in gear and keep your thinking cap on. Peace.
To be able to go to church and tell pastor or stand up and tell everybody my baby's going to college, my baby got a scholarship, it's the next best thing to dying and going to heaven.